Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. Carl Jung, you don't crave the thing itself. Not really. You crave what it promises to silence: the cigarette, the drink, the screen, the person you shouldn't text again. It's not about them. It never was. It's about the quiet storm inside you, the restlessness that keeps rising every time you sit still, the weight in your chest that no one sees, that hunger for escape. That isn't hunger at all. It's grief. You don't turn to addiction because you're weak. You turn to it because no one taught you what to do with pain. No one taught you how to hold sadness, how to sit with emptiness, how to survive without numbing what hurts. So you learned to cope the only way you could. You found something that worked, temporarily. And now that thing has you. It waits for your worst moment, your stress, your loneliness, your shame, and it whispers, "This will make it go away." And the worst part? It does. For a little while. But when it comes back, it's stronger. And so is the craving. Not because you're broken, but because you're disconnected. From your own soul, from your truth, from the part of you that got buried when the pain first arrived and you didn't know what to do with it. Addiction is not about substance. It's about separation. It's what happens when your emotions are exiled and your mind tries to function like nothing's wrong. But something is wrong, and the addiction is just the smoke from that internal fire you refuse to look at. You think you're fighting the craving, but you're not. You're fighting the truth. The truth that your pain is real, that it's asking to be seen, not silenced. That your life has become a series of distractions because presence feels like drowning. But the drowning won't kill you. The avoidance will. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." That's not just a quote. That's your life. Every habit you can't control, every time you relapse, every time you lie to yourself, it's all a strategy to stay far away from the source. You don't want comfort. You want peace. But peace doesn't come from running. It comes from turning around, facing the storm, and asking one terrifying question: what is my pain trying to tell me? Addiction isn't the enemy. It's the message, a scream in disguise, a symbol, a red flag waving from the depths of your unconscious saying, "You've gone too far from who you really are." That's why nothing you try works. The programs, the affirmations, the punishments, the guilt. Because you're trying to fix the symptom while ignoring the wound. This isn't about willpower. It's about awareness. Not about control, but connection. The only way out is in. You weren't born with shame. You were taught it. As a child, you felt things deeply: anger, joy, curiosity, desire. You spoke up when something hurt. You cried without filter. You screamed when you felt invisible, but the world didn't reward that honesty. It punished it. Be quiet. Don't be so dramatic. That's not how boys behave. So you adjusted. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You laughed when you wanted to cry. You learned how to be good and started hiding what felt real. That's when the shadow was born. Carl Jung called it the shadow self. The parts of you were told to hide in order to survive. It's not evil, it's not dangerous, but it becomes both when you deny it for too long. You pushed it down so you could be loved, but now it's pushing back through your cravings, your anxiety, your self-destructive patterns, not because it wants to ruin you, but because it wants to be seen. You think your addiction is about pleasure, but pleasure doesn't make you feel hollow. Shame does. The shame of hiding your truth for so long that you forgot what it even is. That's why your willpower fails, because you're not battling a habit, you're battling yourself. You've turned your own emotions into enemies. So every time a painful feeling comes up, your body goes into war mode, and you reach for the only weapon you know: escape. But the more you escape, the more the shadow grows. And here's the cruel paradox. The harder you try to fix yourself, the deeper the shadow hides. Because healing doesn't come from control. It comes from integration. You can't fight what you refuse to face. You can't heal what you pretend isn't there. You can't be free if part of you still lives in a cage you built just to make others comfortable. The shadow is everything you pushed away to be accepted. Your anger, your lust, your fear, your ambition, your grief, your need for love that you were told was too much. And now all of that has turned inward. It's become your craving, your addiction, your emptiness, not because you're weak, but because no one ever taught you how to feel without drowning, how to hold pain without letting it consume you, how to be fully human in a world that demands perfection. Addiction is the shadow's rebellion. It's the part of you that got silenced, now screaming through your impulses. You can ignore it, but it won't stop. Because it doesn't want to be punished. It wants to come home. And here's what Jung understood. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. That's why you keep repeating the same cycle. That's why every relapse feels like proof that you're broken. You're not. You're just possessed by a part of you you've never listened to. Possession doesn't mean demons. It means disconnection. You've split from yourself, and now the part you've buried is taking control from the shadows. So what do? You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop trying to be who they wanted you to be. And you start listening to the version of you that's been locked away behind shame, behind fear, behind addiction. This isn't a war to win. It's a truth to remember. You're not just the parts you show the world. You're also your wounds, your rage, your desire, your chaos. And until you embrace all of it, you will remain a stranger to yourself. If this content makes sense to you, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you. So let the shadow speak. Let it cry, shake, scream. Let it say the things you never had the courage to admit. That's not weakness. That's how you begin again. Because the shadow isn't your enemy. It's your map. Follow it, and it will lead you back to the parts of you were never supposed to lose. You think the craving is trying to destroy you, but what if it's trying to save you? Most people see addiction as a flaw, a failure of discipline, a personal weakness. But what if it's a coded message from your unconscious? What if your craving is not the problem, but the symptom of a deeper wisdom your mind can't explain, but your soul still remembers? Because you weren't always like this. There was a time when your desire was clean, before it got hijacked, before it was labeled too much, before it became something shameful, something to hide, suppress, fear. Desire was your compass. It told you what mattered, what moved you, what made life feel meaningful. But when your desire was denied, by religion, by family, by culture, it didn't vanish. It just went underground. And now it resurfaces as craving. That craving you feel, it's not just for the substance, it's for connection, for feeling, for aliveness, for wholeness, for home. Addiction is what happens when desire is forced into exile and tries to find its way back through the only door that's still open. You think you're being weak when you reach for that drink, that pill, that screen. But what's really happening is this. Your soul is saying, I'm still here. I still want something real. I still believe there's more than this numb existence you've accepted. And here's the truth. The craving isn't evil. It's misdirected truth. A scream that hasn't been translated. A wound that's asking for ritual and getting repetition instead. Because addiction is a kind of ritual, a cycle, a pattern your mind performs to feel something predictable. When everything inside you feels out of control, it gives you a false sense of order, of comfort, of identity. But rituals are supposed to transform you, not trap you. Your craving is a ritual with no initiation, a ceremony with no guide, a desperate search for meaning, played out in a world that only knows how to sell relief. That's why you keep going back. Not because you're addicted to the thing, but because you're addicted to what the thing represents. Escape, warmth, relief, the illusion of being okay. But here's what Carl Jung understood. Until the craving is confronted, it will repeat. Until it is understood, it will dominate. Because the energy of desire cannot be destroyed, only redirected. That's why recovery isn't about repression, it's about translation. You have to decode what the craving is actually asking for. Not judge it, not silence it, but listen to it fully. Because underneath every addictive urge is a deeper unmet need. And that need will never leave you until it's honored. Maybe you don't need another distraction. Maybe you need truth. Maybe you don't need another rule. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you don't need control. Maybe you need to feel safe in your own skin. Your craving is not your enemy. It's your teacher. And the lesson is simple. You're not here to live numb. You're not here to suppress your instincts. You're not here to become a machine of self-discipline. You're here to feel, to burn, to transform, to reclaim the part of you that was buried when you learned it wasn't safe to want. So the next time the craving comes, don't just fight it. Ask it. What are you really trying to give me? What are you trying to protect me from? What part of me needs to be heard right now? Because addiction isn't a curse, it's a compass. But only if you have the courage to follow it, not to escape, but to return. Return to yourself, to the parts you left behind, to the voice you silenced, to the feeling you avoided. That's the only way the craving loses its power, when you realize it was never here to destroy you. It was here to bring you back home. You don't choose the craving anymore. It chooses you. It shows up like clockwork, when you're tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you're alone. It doesn't ask for permission. It just takes over, like you're watching yourself from the outside, helpless to stop it. That's not bad luck. That's not weak will. That's possession. Not in the Hollywood sense, in the Jungian one. Possession is what happens when a behavior becomes so deeply rooted that it bypasses thought. It becomes automatic, mechanical, and worst of all, invisible. You don't notice the first click, the first sip, the first scroll, because the part of you that was supposed to make the choice is gone, replaced by routine, by repetition, by an inner system that was trained over years to hijack your awareness the second discomfort arises. And once you're possessed, you're no longer responding to the present. You're reacting to the past, to the pain you never processed, to the emotion you never named, to the beliefs you never questioned. This is how the cycle traps you, not with intensity but with familiarity. It feels normal now, and anything outside of it feels threatening, even peace, even joy, because the brain has one priority: survival. And if your system has survived by using addiction to cope, it will keep using it, even if it kills you. But here's the truth that breaks the cycle. You are not your cravings. You are the one who can. Witness them. And that small shift, from I am this to I see this, is where freedom begins. Freedom doesn't come from fighting the craving. It comes from interrupting the unconsciousness. From doing something radically simple. Pause. Feel. Name. Because naming breaks possession. When you say, I'm not hungry, I'm lonely, I'm not tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm not craving dopamine, I'm grieving, you break the spell. Suddenly the craving isn't this all-powerful force. It's a message, one you can respond to instead of obey. But you can't get to that point by accident. You need new rituals. Not rigid rules. Rituals that bring you back into relationship with your body, your breath, your truth. Start small. Before you reach for the addiction, put your feet on the ground. Feel them. Breathe. Don't ask yourself if you're strong enough to resist. Ask yourself, what do I actually need right now? That question is a door, a break in the cycle, a moment where the real you can return. Because every time you pause, you remind your nervous system, we are not in danger. We are not alone. We don't have to escape this moment. We can survive it. We can feel it. And maybe we can even learn from it. This is not about perfection. You will slip. You will reach for the old comfort. And that's okay, because the point isn't to never fall. It's to fall consciously, to notice the moment you leave yourself and choose to come back sooner each time. This is what Jung meant by bringing the unconscious into the light, not with force, but with honesty. The truth is simple. Your addiction wants one thing, your absence, and your healing begins with one thing, your presence. So stop asking if you're strong enough to beat it. Ask if you're willing to see it, feel it, talk to it. And finally, stop letting it speak for you, because that's what addiction does. It speaks in your voice until you forget your own. But now you remember, now you know. The craving doesn't control you, it distracts you, and distraction loses power the moment you choose to return. There's a deeper truth no one tells you about addiction. You don't have to destroy it, you can transform it. You see, craving is not just a weakness, it's energy. And energy is neutral until you give it direction. In Jungian psychology, this process is called alchemy. Not turning metal into gold, but turning chaos into meaning, turning the dark into something divine. It's what happens when you stop seeing your pain as the enemy and start using it as fuel. Most people try to cut the craving out like a tumor. They demonize it, run from it. But here's the paradox. What you resist persists, and what you embrace transforms. Because craving is concentrated life force. It's intensity, fire, hunger. And if you've lived most of your life numb, that fire becomes the only thing that reminds you you're alive. But you were never meant to stay in that fire. You were meant to shape it, redirect it, transmute it. That's what the ancient alchemists knew, and what Jung reminded the modern world. Every addiction is also a potential, a raw force waiting to be purified and reimagined. So how do you do it? You begin by listening, not to the object of the craving, but to the impulse underneath. Because what you truly want isn't the drink. It's relief, not the screen, but connection. Not the control, but peace. Once you know that, you can stop feeding the addiction and start feeding the real need. You find new rituals, not to suppress the craving, but to rechannel it. You let the fire burn, not through destruction, but through creation. Write, move, buildings speak. Create spaces where the energy that once drowned you can now express itself. You stop asking, how do I get rid of this? And start asking, how can I give this a new form? Because the craving isn't here to control you. It's here to wake you, to call you into your body, into your truth, into a deeper version of you, one that doesn't numb but feels, one that doesn't avoid but integrates, one that doesn't perform but creates. That's the path of inner alchemy, not avoidance, but transmutation. You take the substance that once enslaved you and use its energy to build something sacred, a new identity, a new discipline, a new expression of who you actually are, not the obedient version, not the addicted version, but the authentic one. And no, it's not instant, it's not clean, it's not perfect, but it's yours. And that's what changes everything. Because for the first time, you're not waiting to be saved. You're not hoping to be fixed. You're not trying to destroy the part of you that craves. You're finally listening to it. You see, alchemy begins when you realize the part of you that's been trying to escape is also the part that longs to be free. And freedom doesn't come from silence. It comes from expression, from movement, from turning inward instead of running outward. Your craving was never the enemy, your repression was. Now you're the alchemist. You don't beg the craving to go away. You stand with it and ask, what can we create from this fire? And slowly, it answers, not with shame, not with fear, but with vision, with voice. With the power you thought you lost, returning in a form you never expected. This is not the end of your craving. It's the beginning of your becoming. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be found. The version of you that doesn't need to numb, escape, or pretend. It's not some future ideal. It's already here, waiting behind the noise, beneath the pain, under all the masks you thought you had to wear just to survive. You're not an addict. You're not a failure. You're not a broken soul trying to become whole. You are a whole soul, remembering what it means to come home to yourself. This is what Jung called individuation, not self-improvement, not perfection, but integration, the reunion of all the parts you've exiled, the shadow, the desire, the fear, the craving, into a self that is fully human, fully awake, and finally free. Not free from temptation, but free from the illusion that you are less because you feel it. Freedom isn't sterile, it's messy, it's raw, it's the choice to be instead of performing who you think you're supposed to be. And in that space, the craving softens. Not because it disappears, but because it's seen. And what is seen no longer needs to scream. So this is not your ending, it's your integration. No more running, no more numbing, no more chasing false cures for wounds that only truth can heal. You are not your addiction. You are the one who lived through it and came back stronger, wiser, more alive. This isn't a recovery, it's a rebirth.